Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Good morning, friends. The subject of my talk will be Unselfishness is Divinity. I have to give a little bit of autobiographical touch, because when I was a very little boy, I had many questions in my mind. And that's why, had I been born in this country, they would have named it Mr. Why. Because I had gone asking why, and what. I didn't know that these were philosophical inquiries. I was born with those inquiries. Why am I born? What is beauty? And all these questions would come to my mind. What is joy? And I would perturb my mother asking all those questions. Then my mother said, okay, there was a boy like you in Europe, and his mother said to the boy, my boy, you read, then you will know. Then I started reading some books which are available in children's libraries, because I was a child, but I could not find answers to my questions. Eventually I found answers one by one from a book which I didn't have to borrow from a library or anything. That was the book of my own mind. So, as a result of these questions in my mind, certain things I could know which other children would not know. And the science teacher in our high school, he once pointed to me and said, among you all, this is the boy who understands science. Because I had those inquiries. And science also, the word why and the word what, these words are important. So what is divinity? Naturally that question came to my mind. And eventually I learned that unselfishness is divinity. While in India, I was at the headquarters of the monastic order to which I belong, and that is called the Ramakrishna Mission in India. Here it is called Vedanta Society. But in India that is called Ramakrishna Mission. It was started by Swami Vivekananda, who made Hinduism known to the Western world most effectively in the last century. So, the subject of my talk is Unselfishness is Divinity. What is divinity? This question has been answered by Swami Vivekananda also. And it is he who said, unselfishness is divinity. While in India, I had to go and visit one of the centers of the monastic order to which I belong. And that monastic order, as I have told you already, is called the Ramakrishna Mission. So I visited the city of Mysore, where the best school is run by our monastic order. In India we have many activities. One of them is educational activities. And this is in Mysore, the city of Mysore, the best school was run by our order. It was known as Sri Ramakrishna Vidyashala. And when I visited on Mysore center, the Swami there took me to that school. It is a residential school. And I was taken to the top class of that school. And in India, they did not have at that time class 12. The highest class was class 10. And after that, there would be an examination held by the university, and those who would pass, they would go to the university. Then they could study for degrees like BA, BSc and so on. So when I was visiting Vidyashala, the Swami there took me to the top class of that school. It was a residential school. And then I was asked to talk to the students. Then I chose one student and asked him, "Are you a good boy?" And he hesitated for a moment, because in India, self-aggrandizement is considered bad manners. But he was a good boy. Then I said, "You are a good boy, but how do you know that you are a good boy?" Yes, you are a good boy as long as you are unselfish. Who is your good friend? A good friend is he who is unselfish, who is willing to make self-sacrifice for you. In the same way, a good parent is one who makes self-sacrifice for his or her children. And a good husband is he who willingly and lovingly makes self-sacrifice for his wife. The same is true for the good wife. She willingly and lovingly, not grudgingly, makes self-sacrifice for her husband. Is God selfish? Well, if we ask that question, the answer is that selfishness is caused by our individual egos. As long as we have our ego, we can't afford to be unselfish. And in some ways I am a follower of Swami Vivekananda. I try to understand things clearly. And Vivekananda said, "I shall present that highest spiritual truths in a language which will be understandable to the children also." But this is not the custom during his time. The speaker should, or teacher should give teachings which are called now academic teachings. The teacher had to mention the names of other authors and wise people whom he had studied about. But Swami Vivekananda did not belong to that group. I am his follower. And there was another famous British author called Bertrand Russell. He was also of that view. You have to speak in a language which will be understandable to everybody. That's why I came to know certain truths. In the West, now that I've been here for more than 45 years, I've been to different homes on invitation. And in some homes, the frame writing with the label God is good may be seen. God is good. Why is God good? Then one who is good must not have an ego. God does not have an ego. Why not? Well, let me explain. There is a view in Hindu philosophy, and it is called in Sanskrit Drigdrishya Viveka. The seer and the object seen, these two have to be different. That's how they separate the object from the subject. But I am not in favor of that. I have my own method. I say the owner and the object owned, they have to be different from each other. So I own my physical body, so that's why I am not my physical body. I am different from it as the owner. In the same way, I am different from my sense organs and my motor organs. In case you don't know what the sense organs and motor organs are, let me tell you that the sense organs are the organ of sight, the organ of hearing, organ of smell, an organ of taste, an organ of touch. These are the 5 sense organs. And the 5 motor organs are the organ of speech, the organ with the help of which we grab things, that means our hands, and the organ with the help of which we move about, our feet, and the organ which helps us to get rid of the digested food, that means the anus, and the organ which helps us to urinate, or even those people who are fathers, for them to give birth to babies. So these are the 5 motor organs. So 10 organs are there. And then there is an 11th inner organ, which is the mind. I own my mind, therefore I cannot be my mind. Yet the idea of my individual existence is a thought of my conscious mind. If I am not my mind, then how can I be my ego? So I have to be different from my ego. But to separate myself from that ego is almost an impossible task. That's why the saintly philosophers of India, they have these expressions like Nahang, Nahang, Tuhu, Tuhu. Not I, but thou. Thou means God. It is not I, but it is God. You are everything. So if we can transcend our ego, we arrive at divinity, which we all are. And this is the fundamental teaching of all theistic religions. That is, we are all divine. Divine means we are beyond our ego. And if there is no ego, then there is no selfishness. So divinity does not have any selfishness. And the topic of my talk is unselfishness is divinity. Yet most people do not know it. for their teaching, the Hindu philosophers and other great saints also teach that divinity is our true self. We are not our body-mind complex. In Hinduism, as I have told many times during my talks, there are 4 or 5 sentences, all of which teach that we are divine. Aham Brahmasmi, I am divinity. Tat Tamasi, you are divine. Sarvam Khalidam Brahma, everything is divinity. I am Atma Brahma, that's which we consider the soul, that is also divinity. Everything is, and these sentences are called great sentences in Hinduism. If these sentences are saved, that religion has been saved. In Christianity teaches the same thing. Be ye perfect as the Father in heaven is perfect. That is the highest teaching that Jesus Christ has given to his followers. That means, know that you are divinity. And manifestation of the divinity is the purpose of the Ramakrishna Order. That's why the Ramakrishna Order, which is called in India the Ramakrishna Mission, is called by the elderly Swamis Ramakrishna Machine. What kind of machine? Ego-crushing machine. Those who remain in this order, gradually their ego is crushed. They get rid of their ego and the divinity is manifest. This I have told a few times here from this pulpit and I will tell again. That is a young man who has joined the order, is asked by an elderly Swami, do you know the name of the order which you have joined? And that young man says, yes, I know. Tell me what it is. He said, it is Ramakrishna Mission. And the elderly Swami says to the young man, no, it is not Ramakrishna Mission, Ramakrishna Machine. What kind of machine? Ego-crushing machine. If you remain in this order, eventually your ego will be crushed. Your false ego will go away. And then what will happen? Then divinity will become manifested. That is the goal of spiritual life. And I have seen that happen in our order. In our order, we are taught that we are not somebodies, but we are nobodies. Yes, we should not identify with our body-mind complex. There was a monk in our order. He was highly educated and everything. That's why he was made the principal of our BT college in our headquarters, which is in Belur, near Calcutta. BT college means Bachelor of Training. In India, that degree is there, Bachelor of Training. The teachers have to get the degree. Then they qualify to be teachers. BT college. So that Swami was highly educated, so he was made the principal of our BT college. But he had, unfortunately, some false ego still left in him, as a result of which eventually he had to leave the order. He left the order. And what happened to him after that, I do not know. But I know that he had to leave the order. So also there was another Swami who had to leave the order because of his false ego. Then he went out of the order and started his own organization. That organization, of course, did not thrive. So, ego has to be crushed. Why? In order to manifest our inherent divinity. And that divinity is unselfishness. Among our elderly monks, I saw some monks who were highly developed spiritually. That means their divinity was more manifest. And I saw Swami Vishuddhananda, who eventually became the president or vice president of our order. And he was considered to be a person who had experienced divinity. I heard this from one elderly Swami. His name was Videhananda. He was with Swami Vishuddhananda for some years in the center of the Ramakrishna Order, which is in Ranchi, in the state of Bihar. When I was in the headquarters, then he was a retired monk, Vidyananda Swami, otherwise known as Gangacharan Maharaj. And he told me once that he had seen a monk who had experienced divinity. I asked him, who was that monk? Then he named Swami Vishuddhananda. And it so happened that Swami Vishuddhananda was my guru. It is he who gave me the Diksha mantra. And as is expected, he was humility personified, because all God-realized souls are humble. Swami Vidyananda was asked by us, how did you know that Swami Vishuddhananda was in charge of that center where Vidyananda was there, had experienced divinity? Then he said, we pressured him, because we had heard that while he was in a place in Uttar Pradesh, there he experienced divinity. At first he was reluctant to say because he was humble, but eventually, due to our pressure, he admitted that yes, he had that experience. He had gone with another monk to do some spiritual practice in Benares, this holy city. And from there he had to go to another place, which is just supposed to be a good place for spiritual practice. And when he went there, he suddenly had that experience. And that experience remained with him. He forgot his body and everything at that time. And after 3 or 4 days, he became conscious of his body. And so that's how he experienced divinity. And as is expected, Swami Vishuddhananda had no false ego. He had nothing but love for everybody. Then he was visiting the Benares hospital center. And he was staying there because the Swami in charge, his name was similar to my name. His name was Swami Bhaskarananda, otherwise known as Buddha Maharaj. He had great regard for Swami Vishuddhananda. So it is he who would invite Swami Vishuddhananda to come and be there for a few days at least. And Swami Vishuddhananda was there at that time, at that Benares hospital center. And Swami Bhaskarananda came to him and said that he had decided to ask one young man to leave the order, who had just joined the order, but he was not up to the mark to be a monk. But he thought that as Swami Vishuddhananda was there, he would ask for his opinion. And then Swami Vishuddhananda said, allow him to stay. We have to forgive him, because we also must have come because we have some love of Sri Ramakrishna. This young man also has come and joined the order because he has love of Sri Ramakrishna. That's why that young man was not asked to leave by Swami Bhaskarananda. But unfortunately, after a while, the young man on his own left the order. And of course, the reason why he left the order was because of his strong ego. Sri Ramakrishna's picture, which you can see behind me, there were only two pictures taken of him while he was in his physical body. He is a divine incarnation. But this picture was taken at the request of some of his devotees. And in those days, the cameras were not abundantly available. Now there are so many cameras. But at that time there was no camera. You to have a picture taken, you had to go to a photography shop, or a photographer would have to come. So they requested a photographer to come and take a picture of Sri Ramakrishna when he would be in samadhi. That means he would not be conscious of his body at that time. He would be filled with divine consciousness. So that photographer came, and when Sri Ramakrishna entered into samadhi, he tried to take his picture. But while in samadhi, he did not have any body consciousness. So his head was not erect. So to make his head erect, the photographer put his hand under his chin to make the head of Sri Ramakrishna erect. And when he tried to do that, his body came up like it was made of nothing, like a feather. And that startled that photographer. And his camera dropped from his hand. That caused a break in the photographic film. In those days, the films were made of glass. And then when the picture was printed, there was a break in that picture. Later on, they removed that sign of breakage. So this picture of Sri Ramakrishna was the first picture of him taken by anybody. And he was so full of God consciousness that he could no longer identify with his physical body. He knew that he was a divinity all along. And a copy of that picture was given to Sri Sarada Devi, another divine incarnation, who was the spiritual consort of Sri Ramakrishna. She came to teach the world the universal compassion of God. Anyway, and then she showed that picture to Sri Ramakrishna, and he could not recognize whose picture it was, because he was not conscious of his own body. Sri Ramakrishna, there was a flower nearby, and he took that flower and put in front of that picture, as though to worship that picture. And Sri Sarada Devi thought that that was a bad omen. Most probably it showed that he was going to depart from this world or something. And then Sri Ramakrishna understood that, and he said, "Don't worry. A day will come when this picture will be worshipped in many, many homes." It was unthinkable at that time, but now it has been proved to be true. In India particularly, his pictures are sometimes they adore even the buses, state buses, buses owned by the government. At least that's what I saw when I was in India. And there were many other Swamis also who did not have their false ego anymore. In our scriptures, it is mentioned that this world is a dream. We travel from one dream to another, back and forth. When we fall asleep, we enter into our dream world. Then when we wake up, we enter another dream world. That's why that saying is there. Uttisthata jagrata prajnaparan nibodhata. Make effort, become awake. Don't become a somnambulist. And after waking up, finding those who are superior ones, you become spiritually enlightened. That is, get to know your divinity. And when a person has a dream, he thinks that everything is real there. Then somebody comes to that person and says, "Nothing is real here, everything is your imagination." Then the dreamer will say, "What you are saying is not true, because this world is very real." But then suddenly a tiger appears there, and a fierce tiger. It was about to attack the dreamer. And then the dreamer, out of fright, wakes up. So his dream world is gone. And along with his dream world, the dream tiger is also gone. So those enlightened souls are like dream tigers. In this world, which we experience in the state which we call waking state, that is also another dream world. And here the dream tigers are those spiritually enlightened souls, like divine incarnations. So Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Sarada Devi, Jesus Christ, Buddha, they are all those dream tigers. And they help us to wake up. And when we wake up, we experience divinity. Then our false ego is gone. No more identification with the ego. And that when the ego is gone, the state of unselfishness is there. And this unselfishness is divinity. So we have to take the help of the dream tigers. It is called Vidya Maya. And the dream tigers are those divine incarnations. And with their help, we will get rid of this world. And how? By losing our ego. And once we lose our ego, then divinity becomes manifest. The divinity is unselfishness. When the ego is gone, there is no selfishness. Selfishness is caused by ego. That's why Swami Vivekananda said, unselfishness is divinity. And some saintly souls of our order, they were egoless. They are humility personified. I saw some of them. There was Swami Bhaskarananda. He eventually had to become the president of our order. But when he was president, I saw him. I happened to visit our headquarters at that time, because there was a devotee who used to pay my fare to go to India. And Swami Bhaskarananda had seen me when I was a little boy, and I also saw him when I was a little boy. He was in the city where I grew up. He was in charge of the center, Vedanta center, which was there in that city called Shillong. So when I would visit India from this country, he had special fondness for me. Then one day he was walking with other monks. I was also with them. Then he said, you see, I am the same monk which I was 50 years ago. People call me president, but I don't. Those words mean nothing to me. I feel that I am the same monk which I was 50 years ago. He didn't have any false ego. This was about Swami Bhaskarananda. The same was true for Swami Gambhirananda, who eventually became our president. He also did not have any false ego. Swami Vireshwarananda, he didn't have any false ego. And when their false ego was gone, their divinity was manifested fully. So unselfishness is divinity. Even Christianity has this teaching. Be ye perfect as the Father in heaven is perfect. This is the highest teaching that Jesus Christ has given to his followers. Be ye perfect as the Father in heaven is perfect. That means get to know that you are divine. That is the teaching. It is an echo of what we have in our scriptures. An echo of the Mahavakyas. So unselfishness is divinity. Thank you all so much for your patient hearing.